The dictionary defines bias as prejudice in favor of or against one thing, person, or group compared with another, usually in a way considered to be unfair. There are two types of bias, explicit and implicit. Bias is usually unintentionally activated. For example, the assumption that a student's accent somehow correlates to their academic achievement is a bias that can impact classroom instruction. Bias can also lead to microaggressions, which we will unpack later.
Hi, my name is Arlen Peebles with the Illinois Principals Association. Thank you for joining us for this ELN preview on a new course by Carolyn Strong, Bias and Microaggression in the Classroom. Carolyn, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So my first question right out of the gate is, what are microaggressions?
A microaggression is a behavior that somehow stems from a preconceived notion that impacts a marginalized person. So, for example, if a person is walking down the street and they see a person of color walking towards them and they do that purse shift thing.
Yes.
That's a microaggression.
That's a microaggression.
You probably had no intention of offending that person, but because of your preconceived notions of what may happen next, you kind of did that shift. Or you see somebody walking towards you and, in the car, you lock that door. Microaggression. I am a person of color living in a society that is not predominantly people of color. So I've experienced them, and unfortunately, I've also done them. And I'm able to acknowledge that because I have tried to be reflective.
What is the way that a person can be a little more cognizant or aware of how their behavior is impacting someone else in terms of a microaggression?
If this is a person that you interact with regularly, one of the ways that you can do that is by having an open and honest dialogue. One of the things that I see happening now is that someone will say that something is impacting them in a negative way, and instead of an open and honest dialogue happening, we become defensive and we want to defend our actions instead of listening to that person and trying to change how we made them feel. Because at the end of the day, no matter what your intent, all that matters is what was received. And because you, as the person, can't change what was received, why not just listen? This is how this made me feel. Okay, now I can put that into my mental Rolodex and I can pull it out for later. Well, the last time I said something like this, it wasn't received very well. So in the future, I can know that going in. That dialogue includes both sides of the conversation. This is how that made me feel. I'm sorry that made you feel that way. What can I do? As opposed to, well, that's not what I meant. Okay, we know the whole point of a microaggression is that it's not ill will. It's not malintent. It just happens to be that what you're doing has made me feel this way. Very good.
So how can bias impact student learning in the classroom?
Oh, my goodness. Bias can impact student learning in a number of ways. The problem with bias in the classroom is that because we don't talk about it a lot, we really don't know that it's happening until something bigger happens. Because of my capacity in the school, I get a lot of the backlash of that. I get the students that have been sent to me and they're saying, well, I know this is how this teacher feels about me because X, Y, and Z. And the irony of it is that rarely is anything ever explicitly stated. It's very rare, very rare is the time that it's just really flat out. This person has said, I don't like you. I don't think you're going to achieve anything. I don't think you're going to be anybody. That almost never happens.
Right.
And I've been doing this a long time.
A little more subtle than that.
Yeah, it's a lot more subtle than that. It's, well, even though my hand is up, you never bother to call on me. You always sit me in the back of the class. You don't make an effort to get papers to me when I don't have them. Or we're doing an assignment on, I don't know, college acceptance, and I'm telling you that I want to go to this Big Ten school, but you're redirecting me toward junior colleges type of situation. And that's not to say that there's anything wrong with a junior college, but if that's not what I want to research, then I shouldn't be led another way. You should help me research what I want to research. But all of those things tell a student how you feel about them, even though you don't realize it.
And what are some ways that teachers can become more aware of the bias that they're bringing to the classroom?
Reflection is key. Reflection. Yeah. Because we're all human beings. Before we're teachers, before we're anything, we're humans. And so human nature dictates that what we do a lot of times is determined by our experiences. I mean, I say this all the time. I'm like, I, to this day, will throw soap wrappers in the laundry hamper because that's what my mother did. And whenever I say that, people are like, well, what is that for? And I'm like, well, it's dirty clothes. So she would just take the soap wrapper and drop it in there so you didn't have to put an air freshener in there. And it's one of those things that I do because it's one of those things that I grew up doing. Bias is no different. I mean, if you were a kid and you weren't allowed to do certain things or you weren't allowed to play a certain way, you grow up with that. It's not an indictment. It's just a fact. So one of the things that we have to do is be reflective and ask ourselves, was that really okay for mom and dad to do? Was that really okay for uncle to do? Is this really how I want to live my life? And at the end of the day, is this something that I really think, or is this just something that I've grown up doing? Do I believe this? Because sometimes we do things because it's what we've always done, and it may or may not necessarily be what we believe. So that's one of the things you have to ask yourself is this what I really believe? And if it's not, then what is the next step toward getting my actions to line up with what it is that I actually believe?
Right.
And it's not even necessarily always just racial or socioeconomic. Sometimes, especially when you're in community schools, let me sit you in the back of the class because, your brother was too much to handle. So let me just not even go through just go take your brother's seat from last year right in the back of the classroom because I already know what's coming. No, you don't.
Right.
No, you don't. But here we are. You haven't even given this kid a chance because of who his brother is. Same type of thing.
Well, Carolyn, thank you so much for being with us and doing this ELN preview and doing this full ELN course. If you're interested in accessing the full ELN course, go down below to the description and there will be a link there for you. Take care and have a great school year.